It's Friday, the 21st of March 2025. We're delighted today to invite Kaye and Jamie Radcliff to share some of their memories from 40 years of life on the farm at Lower Barrington. Welcome, Jamie and Kaye.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, why did we go to Lower Barrington? I had been farming for more or less since I left school in the back country, which was very much a temporary position. I didn't intend to stay there indefinitely. And in 1960, Kay and I became engaged, and we were looking for a suitable place to spend our lives. And anyway, it was very difficult to find something that suited our budget. And we did a lot of looking, and then suddenly out of the blue came this little property from a real estate agent, but she didn't operate very much, but she happened to have what we wanted. And she also had a man who was wanting to sell this block of land, who turned out to be a delightful father-like figure, and he was most helpful in selling it to us, very generous, and that was our start. We bought this property, and we were now part of Lower Barrington.
Yes.
Which area, if you describe where your place was and who owned it previously?
Oh, well, it was Mr. Carl Sykes,
Oh,
and as I said, he was an extremely generous man, and I will add that he took a great interest in our doings over the years, and he used to make regular visits up, and we were always pleased to see him. Where would you like me to
well,
go?
would Kaye like to?
Well, the property was actually down Allison's Road, and we started off with a 90-acre block with a very run-down little cottage. And my grandmother was horrified when she saw it because the floor was actually sitting on the soft ground. But anyway, we were young and energetic and excited, so we did a lot of renovation and built 2 or 3 rooms and that little cottage. I think for 10 years we lived in that cottage, and in that time we had 4 children, and we built a new house 10 years down the track. But a lot went on between now and then, didn't it, with the farming enterprise? You mentioned that.
Yes, I didn't mention earlier that at the same time we bought this 90-acre block, or 90 acres of farm, we were also able to buy 150 acres adjoining, which is a bush block, and it belonged to Jack Reeves, a well-known character in the district, and he once again was a very reasonable man, and he sold it to us at a very reasonable price. And as Kaye said, we were doing some building. We were able to get logs out of that bush, send them to the mill, and get all the timber for the house.
Yes, so but with the farming, we went from having a few sheep and then into dairying soon after we moved there, didn't we? So
That's right. Well, Carl Sykes was running only sheep.
That's right.
And we knew that we couldn't make a living out of running sheep, and we knew we had to get into dairying. So how do we get into dairying in that situation? we put two cows, and we milked those, I think by hand, had a little separator and made our own butter. And with this milk they produced, the skim milk they produced, we were able to rear heifer calves that we bought. And through various ways we were able to accumulate a small herd. I had friends that lived in Whitemore, and they very generously suggested that we borrow some of their cows that they weren't using, and we in turn reared their calf and returned it. And this enabled us to get a basis of a herd very reasonably quickly. At that time, 30 cows was about an average herd. But it wasn't long before economics got involved and it became about 80 that you needed. So over the years, it's a long story, but just to keep it to a reasonable length, we eventually got to the 80 cows, and we were still sending cream to the factory. And because we did that, we had all this skim milk that was produced, and consequently had a pig enterprise. And I think 7 sows, and they produced all these piglets, and we took a lot of them through to porkers using our skim milk and various byproducts, including potatoes. And this was all going very well. Pigs were very profitable. Sometimes they produced nearly as much as what the dairying did. But very, not out of the blue, we heard it happening, but it was suddenly announced that the dairy company were going to change their policies. They didn't want cream in the future, they only wanted whole milk, which sounded quite attractive. They didn't give much compensation for the milk they were getting. They were getting the butter fat. They didn't give us much for the milk. Consequently, we lost our pig industry, and that was quite a big blow at the time. Mm-hmm. And it affected our income greatly. And we struggled on for a while. And jumping forward a little bit, if we can go back, we dispersed of our dairy herd, and suddenly, unexpectedly, I saw an advertisement in the paper wanting a man with outdoor experience as a field officer in the local poppy industry. So I rang up and had an interview and was given the job. So while I've changed somewhat from being all farming to having this job, but it still allowed me to continue farming. Mm-hmm. And so that sort of covered the dairying part.
I was thinking of Kaye at home. Were you? Because I know you'd be heavily involved in a lot of the work on the farm. So do you want to share a bit of that?
Yes, well, we were growing potatoes, growing peas as well, and we're cropping as well. But then and we had 4 children during that time, and our daffodil side, Jamie's, while we were growing daffodils, Jamie's grandfather, he had that interest in Hobart, and he was hybridising and introducing new cultivars, including the first pink trumpet bred in the world. He was an amazing man, and he travelled overseas. Anyway, your father continued hybridising, and we had some good stock to work on. And then we continued, and it was wonderful. Actually, a lot of work, very intensive, but it was wonderful. It opened up our lives, and we were going quite well on the farm then. So we were able to travel overseas to these amazing flower shows that we went to in America and England, and yes, in Ireland as well. So much. So it was an eye opener. Actually, you wouldn't think growing daffodils would have led into these wonderful experiences we had. So that was another side to our, and we had open days at Lower Barrington. I think we had about 5 open days to the general public, and we had several acres in the end, didn't we? And we used to sell the bulbs and the cut flowers. Very intensive, but it all worked.
Labour intensive though, and the children were involved in that at that stage.
Yes.
Well, they used to help you somewhat
The picking,
didn't they?
Yes. So that was a wonderful, and because that encouraged. It sort of led on to me doing a horticultural course as well. Then I became passionate about gardening, and it just opened up so many avenues. It was wonderful. Yes, we had wonderful years at Lower Barrington. 40 years, yes. So, and the children, we had horses for the 4 children, or the only 3 out of 4 rode. And then, yes, the tennis, we were involved with the tennis club, weren't we? And the school, when the school grew from a state, K to 6, then it was developed to a secondary school. And Jamie was the president at the time when that was changed. I can't remember the date of that, but can you elaborate on that?
No.
That was a huge responsibility, actually, because there were people for and against. The majority, people don't like change, and it worked out very well in the end, but it was not easy.
Not easy.
Yes.
I will remember some of the meetings we had in the hall, and I think everyone in the district that had children went, and we had, of course, the government officials there, and it was quite nerve-wracking, really. But we got through that, and the school duly opened, and I'm very pleased to see it still operating well.
Yes. Yes, and another thing, being keen on gardening and so on, there were people in the area who, we had our daffodil shows, every spring, and that went on. The Anglican Church, we were involved in that, and every year they'd have a flower show, and so we were very involved in that. And that led into forming a garden club, and it became the Kentish Garden Club. And the first meeting was at our place, and that's still going, 35 years. I think it is. It's nearly 35 years. And apparently it's going very well. So that was very heartening. Yes, so I think, and Sheffield has the beautiful temperature and soil for gardeners. beautiful rhododendrons, and there's a lot of help that comes from members of the garden club. Yes, so that's another. Yes.
It also gave us another position, didn't it? Because I think you were secretary and I was president.
Yes, that's right.
Gave us a bit more involvement. And, yes.
Yes, so with the children, Michael, our son, he was very interested in farming, but we had to expand to be able to. We couldn't because there were no neighbouring properties who wanted to sell.
Can I interrupt there?
Yes.
We had expanded prior to that. We started off with one property, and while we were there, I mentioned the Jack Reeves property at the very beginning, and then we purchased one next door neighbour, and then his neighbour, so all the land was in one block, and it had developed into quite a nice little property.
So how many acres were we looking at that stage?
Oh, probably 600.
Oh, wow.
But there was still nowhere to really expand to. You could look at it and couldn't see any potential. And suddenly a friend told us about a block of land at Wesley Vale that he thought was of very good value, and he knew our situation. So we went and looked at it and had a talk to the bank manager, and we were able to purchase this for Michael to get a start on. And he in turn developed quite a little enterprise around Wesley Vale. We covered that reasonably well, do you think?
Yes, right. Yes, I think with the girls.
One thing I was going to mention, that when we first went to Lower Barrington, it really was change in an era. We had two neighbours that were still using draft horses. Bullocks had virtually gone out of the bush for doing logging and so on. So it was a definite change. The potato industry hadn't started as we know it nowadays. The processing works hadn't started. Well, a lot of potato work was still done manually. The big harvesters and so on that you see today did not exist. And I've still got my potato fork hanging in the shed. That was my harvester. And I'd have many, many tons of potatoes with that fork. So we did see a big change.
You had a funny story to tell us about Jack Reeves that you were going to share.
Well, no, it wasn't the Jack Reeves. It was actually a personal one. Jack Reeves would have known plenty of stories.
Oh, right.
But when we had our pigs going well, this particular day I was carrying 2 buckets of milk over to feed to these sows. And for some reason or other I didn't go through the gate. I didn't open the gate, I clambered over the gate. It was a wooden gate. Why not? And as I got over the gate, by absolute coincidence, a pig, a big pig, went through, and I had my legs astride, and he went through, or she went through, and I was astride this pig with 2 buckets of milk. And evidently did quite a circuit down the paddock and trying to keep not spill the milk and not pull off the pig. And all of a sudden, because it happened, I fell off and milk went everywhere. But the worst thing of the lot was Kaye witnessed the whole lot.
Yes, yes. So it's and Jamie, you were very involved with the Lions Club, the Kentish Lions Club.
Yes, yes.
He was one of the charter
members.
and it's a wonderful club in Kentish, the Lions Club. They do a lot of wonderful community work, I believe, still.
And made lifelong friends there, because we brought in members from elsewhere. They weren't all from Kentish, and it was a very, very good club, and it did, well, still working hard and does a lot for charity. One of my neighbours, Bill Viney, who was a very excellent neighbour, great help to us when we were trying to get started. And he had a contract baling business. And he baled, I forget how many customers, but a lot of customers. And he duly sold out, and I was able to purchase his business from him. So for quite a number of years, we had this as part of our income. But Bill, in turn, had been a member of the Marine Board. And he said, I want to see you take my place. I don't quite know how he managed all this now. So I was on the Marine Board for a period of time. And that's all history now.
Kaye, you said it was a very emotional time having to leave Lower Barrington. Can you tell us a little bit about that, or how you felt and what instigated the move?
Well, what instigated the move was that we realised that we couldn't keep going the way we were. Yes, and Michael had moved down to Wesley Vale, so we knew he wasn't able to satisfactorily. So that I think prompted us to think seriously about it. And I think our respective parents encouraged it too, didn't they? So that's why we were both in our early 60s then. So we made that big move. It was hard, very hard. But we didn't look back. It was the best move, even though it was hard and emotional. We made the right decision and bought 3 acres of land at Port Sorrel. So we still had a big garden area, and we still had a lot of bulbs. We continued our hybridising, and then that became too big for us. And we moved down to Hawley Beach and into my parents' cottage, beach cottage. Yeah, and that's where we are. But it was a hard move. It was all our memories, our wonderful memories. It was a wonderful community, beautiful community, and so supportive of each other. Lovely people, and all those lovely get-togethers at the Lower Barrington Hall, especially around Christmas time. Yes, so...
When you mentioned that, I thought to go back to Len Sheriff. Lance and Marine Sheriff were the proprietors of the local store. They ran the telephone system there, which was manual at the time. It was restricted hours, but they were very good. But I think the hours were 7 till 9 daily for the weekdays, and very restricted during the weekends. And I still remember having trunk lines, and after a while, Lance would say, "Are you extending?" And it was always generous. It wouldn't be right on the 3 inches. And that went on for a few years, and the automatic exchange then came in, and it was quite dramatic to suddenly have a phone that you can pick up and ring any time.
Yes. Yes.
But they were wonderful people. They were the hub of the district, and they just went out of their way to be very helpful to so many people.
Well, we want to thank you so much because you're a totally inspirational couple, and we just so appreciate you giving us your time this afternoon. Thank you so very much.
I think we've probably waffled on far too long.
And it's brought back so many memories that you feel very emotional.
Yes, well, I thought, I'm sure you had lots more that you wanted to share. And I thought, how long have we been?
How long?